Hello everyone and welcome back to How Bored. You're not going to be seeing my face today because, well, I have both of my cameras focused on the table here, where I'm going to teach you how to set up and play Final Girl as just a core box. And I will be doing this through using A Knock at the Door as the feature film for this setup. To be able to play Final Girl, you're going to need the core box plus any feature film of your choosing. And as you decide to, you can actually mix and match these feature films. I could, for example, take the location from this feature film box and then swap out the killer with one from a different feature film. But for simplicity's sake, we are just going to be doing this killer and location from A Knock at the Door feature film. And the reason I chose this one specifically is because out of the ones I own, this is going to be the simplest to teach, and most of the rules I'm going to be teaching you are just going to be for the core box. The individual feature film boxes will have a separate little notation, and I will only really reference it for this video in terms of setup, and then if you watch the playthrough, I will go more in depth onto the feature film setup and rules. So to get everything started here, let's go ahead and actually open up our feature film box first. Now the coolest thing about these boxes is that your lids are also your boards. So we're going to take off the killer board here. I like to kind of bend this flap a little bit, just lightly, but that'll help it be a little bit flatter. Otherwise it'll kind of stick up like this, and then it's just a little bit annoying on the table. So we're going to go ahead and put our killer board out there. Again, that can be whichever killer you want. For this example, I am using the Intruders. And while we're here, we'll go ahead and pull out our killer box just so that we have those resources ready. And as well, in the box, you're going to have a rule book for both the location and the killer. We're not going to worry about this right now, so we're going to go ahead and set that off to the side. Let's go and flip the box over, and we'll go ahead and get our location. Again, bending the flap just ever so lightly to get it to level out. We're going to take our location and put it up here. And now I will briefly mention that normally in this type of scenario for a how to play and teach, I would not use the special playmat for the game just for vanity reasons. I wouldn't do that, but in this case I'm using it because I think the labels on the playmats are actually very helpful in terms of getting the game set up and knowing where things go. Of course, you're probably not going to have these because the core of Final Girl does not come with the playmats. They are all separate. This is the Series 2 playmat with the Series 3 accessory box that has the dice tray and the bonus mat over here. Again, I'm using this for reference points, but by all means you don't need to have these playmats. I just think it'll be easier to make everything visually acceptable for people. So we now have our location and our killer board pulled out, and we'll pull out our location box as well. Again, inside the feature film there will be another rulebook pamphlet for the location with your components list and special rules. Again, we won't really be covering that too much in this video. This is mostly just setup and how to play the game. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and just briefly set aside our location and killer boxes. We will be returning to those shortly, but those are typically a little bit more specialized to the feature film. We just want these out to do things with our core box, to have them handy. So let's go ahead and grab our core box now and open it up, and there will be a decent amount of going back and forth between the two for getting set up. It might seem a bit tedious at first, but I promise you the more that you set this game up, the insanely faster that it gets. So in here we have our Final Girl rulebook. You can definitely keep this handy if you need the reference on the back of the book here, if you haven't already read through all of the rules. Or if you have and you just want the reminders, this is very good for having the iconography handy and then your turn summary and action cards. So definitely recommend keeping this readily available, but for now we're going to go ahead and set that to the side. Now in here is also the Final Girl board. This is what you are going to be using if you're not running the playmat, and I will put this out here just for, again, simplicity's sake, so you can know what to expect when you're just playing without the playmats and using the core box. So we're going to take this and we're going to place it below. It would normally just go below our killer board, and by all means, without the playmat, you can easily condense this space. You can kind of butt these boards up together and then, save a little bit of room. I have some techniques that I might show later on in the video on how to save some more space, but for right now, I'm just going to do this as kind of the standard layout here based on the playmat's recommendation. Because it is kind of handy sometimes to have a little room around these boards for extra things going on. Ignore some of the extra things I have in my core box. I have put some extra things from other feature films and whatnot in here. As well, in your feature film, in your killer box, there should be some final girls, unless you are like me and you have allocated them to your core box. In which case you've probably already played the game. But your final girls are going to be in here, so just keep that in mind. I have put all of mine into the core box, so I can have any at any given time. So ignore the tier board. This is not part of the core box. That is an add-on that I got separately, as well as some of these extra tokens here. So we can ignore those. So in the core box, we're going to go ahead and grab our stack of action cards here. And we're just going to set these to the side for a minute because pretty soon we will build our action card tableau. So we'll just have those handy. We'll go through and find our final girls. Like I mentioned, I have all of mine in here. So if those are in the killer box, you can wait on those for a minute until we get in there. And for this one, it is Ava and Ginny. I think for this one, I'm going to pick Ginny because I just like playing as her. So we're going to select her as our final girl and return the other one to the box. Next up, we're going to go ahead and grab our dice out of here. Again, we'll have a spot for those in a minute, but we're just going to pull those aside. We're going to take our time marker as well as our bloodlust marker and pull those out. We'll put the red circle blood disc marker on the bottom of the killer board here, and in a second we'll get that time token taken care of. We're going to grab out these item markers just to have them available. You can just set them to the side for right now, but there is a decent chance that you might end up needing these during the game, so it is always important to have these little discs handy. I'm going to set them right there for now. Alright, and then we're going to go ahead and unload. I'm going to move this up here so you can see it a bit better. We're going to go ahead and unload all of our meeples here. And this is going to include all of our victim meeples, as well as our killer meeples, our horror tracker meeple, and our final girl meeple. Okay, so we're going to take those and we're going to pull out the 3 special victims here, being the orange, the blue, and the white. And then we're just going to set them aside so we have them available. Those are our special victims, which can come up in certain circumstances. We're going to take the rest of our normal victims here, just these, oops, if I can pick them up here, just these normal yellow guys. We're just going to grab all of those and make a general supply of them. Just make it wherever's handy for you. Again, the playmats show the spot for them up there, so I am just using that. And next we're going to grab all of our health tokens here. Feel free to take more time grabbing these out a bit more delicately than I am. I'm just kind of getting in there and grabbing a fistful at a time because, well, I'm impatient. So, okay, so we got all of our hearts out, and we're just going to put those in a general supply for now. We'll go ahead and load up everyone's health here in just a little bit. Okay. So general supply of those, it's a little bit off camera, but it's right below the final girl. Of course, there's some miniatures here. Ignore those as well. Those are from something else. So now we're going to grab our final health tokens. These are going to be the black ones that show the heart with the die on front. These are the tokens you're looking for. You'll notice that some of them have hearts on the back, whether it be 1, 2, or 3, and others are blank. And then you also have a couple of white ones. So the white ones, we're just going to go ahead and leave set off for now. And we want to flip all of these other black final health tokens. We want to flip them to the side with the heart and the die so that we don't see the backs of them. We're just going to take them in a little thing here and just shuffle them however you want, as long as you don't see the backs. That's the important part. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle up these health tokens here. All right. And then just at random, we're going to take one for ourselves, again, without looking. We're not going to look at that during any point in the game until we need to. And next, we're going to take one for each active killer and give it to them. So in the case of a knock at the door, there is actually 3 killers that you're taking on. Most boxes, there's only going to be 1 that you're going to be facing. So this is a unique one where we're going to be putting in 3 final health tokens. And for most feature films, after you've gotten final health tokens on both the final girl and any killers, you are just going to take the remaining tokens without looking at them and put them back in the box. Okay, so that is currently everything that we need out of the core box. If you would like to, just to have them handy, it is not bad to have these extra location tiles, which you can use in the event that a space gets too crowded. You can use these and their associated markers to represent locations on the board where you can put multiple meeples on here a lot more easily. I haven't really run into too many scenarios where I have needed them, but they do come in handy, so keep these in mind that you might need these for your feature film, so don't be afraid to have them handy if you want to. I just typically don't worry about it. So I'm going to put those back, and we're going to keep our white final health tokens handy here because those probably will come up later in the game. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and close up our final girl box, or our core box for right now, and put that aside. That is everything we need out of that. So we'll go ahead and take that time token from earlier, and we'll put that on the 6th space of our player board here. The dice, again, you just kind of leave anywhere within reach for now. I'm going to put them in the dice tray just so they're somewhat out of the way here. Alright, so now for the action card tableau. This one will be the same for every game. There might be a couple of extra action cards that you'll get from your feature film, but these action cards will always remain the same. And I have 2 different methods for applying the action tableau depending on what kind of space you have here. So first thing, we're going to look at these cards, and you're going to see at the bottom right there is a time symbol and a cost associated. These ones with the yellow text are all going to be 0 cost. There are 6 of them in total. There's 2 copies of Focus, 2 copies of Walk, 1 Short Rest, and 1 Weak Attack. This is going to be your starting hand and cards that you'll be able to pick up for free throughout the game. So we're going to take these 6 cards and set them aside as our starting hand. The rest of these here will be going to our action tableau. Now, the standard way of doing this is taking each card and laying them out individually, keeping duplicates stacked just for ease of use. So, for example, we have 2 close calls here, which are a 1 cost card, just to show you that, 1 cost down there. So we're going to put that in our first spot, and just kind of the nicest way to do it is in ascending cost so that it's easier to keep track of if you ever have an empty spot so you know where things go. So let's go ahead and lay that out. So next up here we have Sprint, which is a 2 cost card. So we'll go ahead and drop that down here, and there's 2 copies of that as well. 2 copies here of Search, also a 2 cost card. We'll deal with the cost here in a little bit, but this is just for setup purposes that we're worrying about. We have 2 cost here as well for Guard, another 2 copies of those. Now we're into the 3 cost here with Distraction. We have 2 copies of those. We'll drop those here. And you can't see it down here, but there is a second row to this tableau, which you probably will end up needing. Another 3 cost, 2 copies of Improvise here. So that's 1, 2, and 3 cost cards. Now we're on to the 4 cost, and these are all just singleton copies. So we have 1 copy of Planning here at 4, Furious Strike here at 4 as well, Retaliate at 4, dropping that down there, Long Rest at 5, and then finally Critical Blow at 6. So we've got our action tableau all laid out. That is one method of doing it. This makes it very easily visible and accessible to be able to just grab the cards that you need at any given time. Like, oh, here's the search, I'll grab that, and you can easily read and discern each individual card. The other method that you can use if you're a bit more tight on space and you're not too worried about having to remember every card, you could also just do the stacking method. I've done this in the past where you literally just basically leave it as a deck, and then as you're buying cards, you just look through it and be like, okay, this is the card I need, so I'll go ahead and pull that out and pay my time. So that is an alternate method as well if you are a bit tight on space. I've gotten to the point where I do prefer the tableau because it is just a little bit easier to handle. In terms of trying to remember, oh, hey, these are probably the cards that I need to get, or you can keep better track of what cards are in play, which ones aren't, so on and so forth. So use whichever method applies better to you. I've kind of home ruled that for myself of doing the deck style in times where my table space has maybe been a little bit tighter than is ideal, because this game can sometimes get a little bit sprawling. So saving whatever space you can be very important. Alright, so our action tableau is now laid out. We have most of our stuff set up here. We just got a few more steps from the core box, and then we'll move on to our feature film details. Let me get that Bloodlust tracker back in the right spot there. I kind of bumped that. Alright, so now we're going to grab one of our killer meeples here, one of these red guys. They're a little bit bigger than the rest, and we're going to look at our killer board here. So up on the Intruder's killer board, it might be a little hard to see, that shows 3 of that hockey mask symbol right there. And if we reference the back of our rulebook here, that will refer to horror. So that means our starting horror is going to be at a 3, and this is a very important mechanic throughout the game. So we're going to take one of those killer meeples and put it on the 3 on our horror tracker here. This is for the intermediate, like normal mode of Final Girl. On the back of this, there is an extreme difficulty. I would not recommend that for your first play, of course. Start with the simpler side of things. It will make your life a lot better. These other 2 are going to get placed on the board once we deal with the setup card. So now we'll go ahead and do our health really quick, and then we'll be able to get into the actual feature film stuff here. So if we look at our final girl here, in the top left, it shows that she has 6 health. The important thing to note about these final health tokens is that they actually do count as a health point. So we only need to add tokens up to our total -1. So in this case, since she has 6 health, this is already showing 1 health down here on the token. So we just need to add 5 hearts to our player board here to make that up to 6. So we'll go ahead and add 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And there. Now Ginny is set up with 6 health. The intruders, if you look up at the top right below that horror symbol, again, probably a little hard to see, I apologize, shows 6 hearts per killer. And it's the same situation. These final health tokens count as 1 health for them as well. So we only need to put 5 tokens on each killer. So go ahead and grab our first 5 here. These spots are a little bit smaller, so we do kind of have to stack them a little bit, which is perfectly fine. All right, and there we go. We have our final killers now. It might be a little hard to tell, but on each of them I have a stack of 3 and a stack of 2, that one that I just knocked over, to represent our 6 total health per killer. So basically 18 health that we have to chew through on our killers. So there is the core box stuff done. That is all that we can do before getting into our feature film boxes. So we're going to go ahead and grab our killer one here, because that's the one that was on top, and we're just going to go ahead and pop this little guy open. And now these will vary, but every single killer and location box is going to have a set of tarot cards. Some of mine got flipped here, apologies for that. So you're going to take those tarot cards and we're going to set them aside, because we're going to end up mixing the 2 sets of cards. For the killers as well, you are pretty much always going to have a set of finale cards, which represents the top half of the killer, and then dark powers, which will represent the bottom half. The art will overlay with the killer there for the most part, so should be pretty easy to discern which. So we're going to go ahead and grab our dark powers here and just go ahead and give them a quick shuffle. As always, without looking, we're going to grab a card and we're going to put it on the bottom to be their dark power to then later unlock once they hit that stage. So we don't need the rest of the dark power cards. We'll set those aside. We'll take our finale cards, which you'll see have an action represented up here. Just for a quick example, they're going to be a different art on the back, so you want the side that has the art matching the actual killer on the board. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle those up, and again, without looking, we're going to grab one and place it up here, and it should line up. There's a red K up there icon that this should line up with to show basically an action line on what the killer is going to do. Okay, so dark power and finale cards, we're done with those. We can put them back in our killer box. We have the tarot cards set aside. For this feature film specifically, it comes with 2 extra final, it comes with 1 extra final health token, which might be needed in the case of having 3 killers, and then an active killer token. So for this box, we're going to take the active killer token, and that's going to go ahead and start up on the top killer there. I'll explain more about that as we get into the playthrough for this. Next, we're going to go ahead and take our extra 2 killer meeples, which, again, there are 2 extra killers in this box, so you need the 2 extra meeples to be able to represent them on the board. So we'll just go ahead and pull those out and have them set up, and we're going to be good with our killer box for now. So we'll seal that back up and put that to the side. Next, we're going to go to our location box here. This is going to be where a lot of the remainder of setup happens, so hopefully it's not too bad. All right, again, we're going to pull out the terror cards from this box here, and we're going to go ahead and put them in with this. Now, normally it would actually be there's less terror cards in the location box and more in the killer box. It appears the last time this was played, these cards didn't get separated properly, and that is A-okay. But just so you know, typically there's going to be less in the location box and more in the killer box. So now with every location as well, you're always going to have a small stack of setup cards, a stack of event cards, and a stack of item cards. Those are going to be present in pretty much every location box. This one comes with some extras. It has crafted items, as well as, extra items there, sorry, as well as supply items. These are bonus cards that aren't going to be present in most feature film boxes, so we're going to go ahead and set these to the side for now and kind of ignore them for the time being. And then, of course, up here we have some tokens as well that are relevant to the location. We do not need these immediately, so we're just going to go ahead and set these off to the side for the moment because they can come up during the game, but unless a feature film specifically tells you to in the setup, these tokens are just things that will come up through events or other means. So we're going to go ahead and put these to the side for now. Alright, so now we have all of our cards handy. Let's go ahead and seal back up the location box. Again, there might be additional things in the feature film itself that you'll need to pull out that might be relevant. This is just what is needed for this specific scenario, but this also encompasses what is going to be present in pretty much every feature film. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and take our setup cards, give those a quick shuffle. There's only around 5 or 6, I believe. It's not a huge deck, so just a quick shuffle will suffice. I'm going to put it up there to have it handy. There are cases where you can just use a setup card and then put the rest away, but I prefer to just keep the whole deck out because there are some situations in which you will need more setup cards throughout the game, so I recommend keeping those handy. Next, we're going to go ahead and shuffle up the event deck here, these blue cards. And you'll notice on these cards as well that they have this additional icon here. This house is representing Wingard Cottage. That lines up with this half of the feature film. So if you're ever in doubt on where a card goes in a feature film box, it will have an icon down here to show you that, hey, this goes into that box. Same thing with the setup. It has that house, which is the icon for Wingard Cottage. And in the case of the intruders, it actually does have its own icon here. I'm trying to remember where one is. Here we go. Without spoiling too much, that is the icon for the intruders. If you ever see that symbol, that means that goes with the killer half of the box. Okay, so we got our events decently shuffled up here. It doesn't need to be crazy. And then we're actually going to pull it off, and we're just going to set it aside for a minute. We're not going to worry about looking at it yet because we have a few more steps to go through before we get to that point. But this is going to be what's called your starting event. So we're going to go ahead and now take the item deck. And there are some locations that have special rules around the item deck. This one is just kind of the box standard, simplest form of the item deck. So we're going to go and give it a shuffle up here, and then we're going to make 3 piles of 4 cards each. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the extra cards we are actually going to leave set off to the side because there are cards that will allow you to go through the extra items that don't make it into the game. So each of these piles now we're going to go ahead and take and put above a location at the top of our location board here. So this spot is for the boathouse, this one is for the shed, and this one is for the garage. There's also a spot here that shows setup, so if you want to put your stack of setup cards there, that is perfectly fine. Again, I'm going off of the playmat. Okay, so we'll get our second stack of item cards here. So we have boathouse and shed now covered. And lastly, garage. These will be items that you can find in those locations. Now that we've got them in place, we're going to flip over the top card of each so we get a little sneak preview as to what is going on in these spots, as to what is there. Okay, so right off the bat, we have 2 blueprints, one in the boathouse, one in the shed, and last is the fireplace poker, which is a weapon. We'll cover items in a little bit more detail here pretty shortly. Okay, so now pretty much the last couple steps of setup here. We're going to go ahead and take our deck of tarot cards, which again is both the location and the killer, and we're going to give it a nice shuffle. You want to make sure that there's a good integration from both sides of the box as possible. Of course, the ratio is typically going to be there's more of the killer cards than the location cards. That is to be expected. Do not worry about that. Sometimes the tarot deck, I do like to do a little bit of a pile shuffle here just to make sure that everything is nice and mixed in, but you absolutely don't have to. This is just a personal preference thing. I do some normal shuffles as well. Sometimes I riffle shuffle and whatnot, but I'm a little constrained on space right now, so I'm just kind of making it work, and I don't want to shake the camera too much either. I know it's probably been a little bit shaky this entire video, and I apologize for that. It's just how I have it mounted, so... Now that we have all of our terror cards, nice and mixed up, we're just going to grab the top 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're going to take those, and that is our terror deck for the game. These are the only terror cards that we're going to be playing with for this game. The rest of these are just going to be set aside. This increases a lot of variability and helps keep the game fresh through each play, but there are some times where tarot cards are even duplicated, so you might see the same one more than once in a given game. Alright, and now next up, we're going to go ahead and grab the top of our setup card here, and this will tell us where everything needs to go in the start of the game. So all these numbers here, those are going to represent victims. This is going to be your final girl, and this is the killer symbol. That's where the killer is going to start. There are some feature films in which the killer actually does not start on the board, but will use this as a reference point, so keep it face up. After you use a setup card, just kind of leave it face up until the game instructs you otherwise, or to grab another one. But basically, we're just going to be taking this and putting victims in all the indicated spaces, as well as ourselves and the killers. Since there's 3 killers, they're all just going to go on that same space here. So we'll take our black, our gray, and our extra red killer meeple here and put them all on that bottom left corner where this setup card instructs us to. All right, so then we are all the way over here. That is going to be this bathroom right there. Hopefully you can see that okay. Sorry, I'm probably blocking this other camera, aren't I? I keep forgetting that's there. Okay, so next up we got some victims. So we got 2 all the way up here in the boathouse. Let's grab 2 from our supply really quick. And we'll go ahead and drop them in there. Let me lay these flat so they're a little bit easier to see for you. Okay, and then we got 3 in this location right next to the, oh, that's the lakefront there. We'll place 3 of our victims in there. And then we got 2 in the space adjacent to it and 1 up in the shed. So we'll drop our 1 up in the shed, 2 adjacent. And the number of starting victims you're going to have are going to vary, as well as where they are and how dense they are. So then we have 2 are going to be here in the house in the kitchen. That's quite nice. Okay. Cooking up a little meal there. And then we got 2 more down here in the laundry room. All right. So we're going to take 2 down there. Okay. And it looks like that is all of our victims, as well as ourselves and the killers, all set up and ready to go. So the last step now for getting the game set up and ready to go is resolving our starting event here. So this is the event card that we drew earlier on, and we're going to read this here. So this is the kick scooter, and there's different types of events. There's some that'll put things on the board, that'll put additional victims on the board, that'll make things happen. It depends. So this one says place the scooter token on the outdoor space closest to you. So let's go ahead and find our scooter token here. And this one is definitely going to be a little hard to see because it's pretty dark. But this is the scooter, and we are over here. Now, there's numbers going between these different locations, and that will show where the entrances and exits of this are. So we have an outdoor space, 1, 2 over here. But if we look down here, the other nearest one is going to be 1, 2, 3... 1, 2, yeah, okay. So this is going to be the closest outdoor space to us, so the scooter token is going to go out there. Okay, when you are with the scooter, it moves with you, but it must be left on the last outdoor space if you move indoors. Once per action phase, you may use the scooter to move up to 2 spaces. Victims cannot follow you during this movement, and that is definitely some information we'll get into later on. But basically, this is a way to help us kind of scoot around the outside of the map a little bit easier, which is quite nice, especially considering that the scooter is all the way up here and our killers are down here. So we got a little bit of distance to be able to actually make use of it. So since that is a persistent event card, this one will just continuously stay out here. There are some that at the bottom will say discard this card, or when something happens, then discard this card. Not all events are going to stay out there, but this is a nice permanent thing that we have for the game, and it's actually a really good one to be able to start off with here. Okay, so now for the actual flow of the game here. So we're going to, again, reference our rule book because it is laid out on here, but this is going to be easier to see. So what we're going to be doing during a turn here, it's actually kind of more of a round structure. Our turn is mostly the first 2 phases, and then the last 3 are general upkeep of the game and making things actually happen. So the first phase of the turn summary is the action phase, where we're going to get to play these action cards and make some stuff happen. Next is the planning phase, where we're going to purchase these action cards. So again, these cards have that cost on the bottom right that will show how much time you're going to have to spend in order to purchase them. We'll cover that in more depth here soon. I'm just doing a rough turn breakdown for the moment. So planning phase, you're able to buy cards, and then you'll reset your time to 6 every time that you buy cards. And that is the only time that your time will ever actually reset. Otherwise, it is just wherever you leave it. And then any cards that we used that turn or that were in our discard area will then return to our tableau. So the cards are going to keep cycling in and out. It's not like once you use them, they're gone. You can buy them, use them, and then you'll have to wait a turn to be able to buy them again. Again, we'll cover more of that in detail soon. Next is the killer phase, where first we're going to resolve the killer action, and then we're going to draw a terror card, which in a lot of cases has more things for the killers to do, but there is more to it than that. After that is the panic phase. This only happens if a victim is in the space of a killer after a victim was killed. So, for example, if these two victims were in the space with the killer here, this one dies, this one will now panic, and it's going to try to move to a different space and get away from the killers, because, of course, victims are big scaredy cats. They don't want to be around these big bad killers at all. Okay, and then last is the upkeep phase, where we're going to reveal the killer's finale. That's the top card up here again, if there are no terror cards left in the deck. And then we also, every turn, get a chance to rearrange any items that we might have. So that's our overall turn summary. We'll kind of break these down a little bit here. So when it comes to playing action cards, you are going to look at your current hand, and you are going to choose an action card that you want to play. So maybe for this turn, I want to walk. I want to move around the board a little bit. And we'll kind of dissect these cards super quick here. So you'll see these stars on the side, and that is where these dice come in. Whenever you play one of these action cards, you're going to have to do what is called a horror roll. And you're going to roll a number of dice based on your horror level over here. So if we look at our horror track, right now we're on the 3, which is in this white section here, and you can see it's got a cutoff and it shows 2 dice. That means that whenever we have to make a horror roll, we only get to roll 2 dice for that. And depending on how many successes we get will affect the outcome of that roll. So if we look at these dice here, we'll look at the 1 side, and the 2 are both blanks. That represents a total failure. There is no success out of that die whatsoever. But if we look at the 3 and the 4, you'll see 2 cards there, which means that for each one of those symbols that you see, you can discard 2 cards to turn that into a success, which is where the 5 and 6 come into play. They have those stars that are on the card. That represents a success from the die. So in the case of those 2 dice that I just rolled, which was actually very lucky, I rolled double 5s, which is a double success. So once we roll those dice after we play our card, we reference our card to see what that is going to allow us to do. In this case, we have 2 stars, which means we are going to be able to move up to 2 spaces, and this symbol on the side here means that we lose time. So we would be able to move 2 spaces and then move our time marker down 1, showing lost time, where the killers are starting to catch up to us a little bit. If I only had 1 star, I'd be able to still move 1 space and lose 1 time. But here on the no stars, so if every dice you rolled is a failure or you got a partial success that had that 2 card symbol again, if you rolled this and you didn't have cards to discard or you didn't want to discard for it, then that would be a failure as well. So if you get no successes here, you actually get 2 options for this card, where you can either move up to 1 space, lose 1 health, and lose 2 time. That symbol is losing 1 health there. Or you can just lose 2 time. So you get the option here to still be able to move around the board, but it'll come at a greater penalty than just getting a single success. So there are ways you can let yourself be punished but still get something out of it, or you can just be strictly punished but not as severely. So that's kind of the anatomy of a card. All of these are going to have different effects, and I'm just going to kind of briefly show off the basic effects here. So we have the focus card, which is another 0-cost card. This one has that hockey mask with a slash through it. That means you're going to reduce horror. So if we got the double success on this card, we would take our killer meeple over here and put it from a 3 down to a 2. If we ever go from the 2 down to a 1 or a 0, and then at that point, now we are in a different stage of the horror track, in which we can now roll 3 dice for a horror roll instead of just 2. And these are the luckiest dice rolls I've ever had today. So enjoy that on camera while you guys can. So if we're down to the green here, that means we get to roll 3 dice. If we're in the white, we get 2. But if somehow, some way, you get yourself all the way into the red, you now only get 1 die, which means on these cards, you can now only ever get, at best, a single success until you get out of that mode, which thankfully there's only 1 spot for it. But if you're ever in a situation where, say, you're maxed out on the green or you're maxed out on the red, and you would either increase or reduce horror respectively, so if I'm on the green and I reduce horror, instead of reducing the horror any further, I would gain additional time. If you would increase horror anymore while you're on the highest space, you would instead increase the bloodlust, which is this killer's track up here that is going to make them stronger throughout the game. So really, ideally, you don't want to be doing that. Okay. So there's focus, and of course focus also deals with time as well. On a double success, you'll increase by 2 time. On a single, you will lose 1 time, and on a failure, you just lose 2 time. Okay, so there's playing cards. We also have short rest and walk are kind of your other 2 core concepts for your basic action cards. So short rest is about healing. Up here you would heal 2 health, and you can only heal up to your max. You cannot exceed that. Here you'd heal and lose 1 time. Down here you could heal, increase horror, lose 1 time, and then this symbol means that you end your turn. That is, you cannot take any more actions after that. You immediately go into the planning phase and forfeit any remaining actions you might have had. And lastly, for the zero cost cards, here is the weak attack. This is your damage symbol, so this means you would be able to do a damage. This, you can do a damage and lose a health yourself, and this one you just lose a health and end your turn. So pretty devastating if you fail on those last 2 here. But they are also very beneficial, especially later on in the game. And now you'll see with the weak attack that it has a damage here, but if we go up to our weapon, the one that's showing the fireplace poker, this one also has that damage icon. In the case where you have the fireplace poker equipped in your hand, this would now deal 2 damage because weapons are modifiers, and if they have an effect that says they can't modify certain things, then it wouldn't apply to this. But this doesn't state anything like that, so we would be able to use this fireplace poker to modify our weak attack and make it deal 2 damage instead of just 1. Okay, so there's the zero cost cards, and really that's the conceit of most of these other cards. There's a couple unique ones that I will mention as well, but we also want to talk about reaction cards. And the first one I'm going to talk about, this one isn't really a reaction, but this is like a card you can use at any point in time that you roll dice. So this is close call, so after any horror roll, you can use this card. You can just discard it to be able to re-roll any 1 die, or you can spend 2 time to re-roll all dice. Now, this isn't as many dice as you want, so if you do this part of the effect, you have to re-roll any dice that you rolled as well as successes, or you can just discard it to re-roll 1 die for free, instead of having to spend the extra 2 time. Sprint is the same as walk, but it allows you to move more spaces. A search here is kind of an important one for the game. This will allow you to search through those item decks up there. This is the primary way to interact with those. On a double success, you get to take the top 2 of each deck, or off of the deck of the space that you're on. So to be able to search, again, these locations are labeled, and on the board they are represented by orange borders as well as that wrench icon. So, for example, if I'm in the garage and I take the search action, if I get that double success, I can go up to the garage and I can grab the top 2 cards off of that deck, and in this case, I will be able to choose one and add it to my items. On the other hand, I believe I can also just choose to not take an item, but it's usually best to, even if you just throw it in your backpack if you don't actually want to equip it, and then you place the other on the top face up or underneath face down. Otherwise, if you get a success or even a failure, you will just be taking the top item of the deck, even if the card is face down. So like if I just took 1 item off here and then I did it again next turn, this top card is face down, so I don't get to flip it over and see what it is first. I just take it. If I get the double success, then I can take the top 2 and then put 1 face up again if I wanted to. But the only time that you're really going to have a face-up card at the top of that deck is at the start of the game, or if you get the double off of the search effect here. Next up is Guard, which is our first reaction card, and I'm going to talk about both of these at the same time because they're pretty similar. They just cost different time and have different benefits. So when a killer attacks you during the killer phase, you can play one of these in response, discarding it from your hand and then making a horror roll. If you get 2 successes, then you get to ignore all damage from that killer's attack. If you roll a single success, you get to reduce the damage by 2, and on a failure, you just reduce it by 1. So no matter what with Guard, you are going to be reducing damage. That is all this card is for, is just reducing damage that you are going to take to help you survive longer. This one costs 2 time, and there's 2 copies of it, whereas Retaliate only has 1 copy and costs 4. And that is because, as well as reducing damage, you are going to be able to deal damage back. And again, this is an attack that can be modified by weapons. So if we had that fireplace poker, we got the double success here, this would state that we ignore all damage from that attack, as well as we would deal 3 damage instead of 2 because that fireplace poker added an additional one. So important difference between those two here. The next unique one that I want to talk about, we're going to skip Distraction because that's just an upgraded version of Focus that costs 3 times to buy, but it's going to help you reduce horror very effectively. Next up is Improvise here. So on a double success, this will allow you to, until this action phase ends, all 3s and 4s are successes. So anytime we roll this partial success face, that will now become a success instead of just a partial success where we would need to discard 2 cards to make it a success. This would just automatically be a success. So each die now has increased chances of giving you a success for the rest of the turn. So this is really nice to use on a setup for a big turn. On just a single success for only the next horror roll, all 3s and 4s are successes. So instead of being all rolls for that action phase, it's just for the next one. And the last space you lose a horror, you gain a horror and lose a time. So that's Improvise. And then Planning is pretty much the last unique one here, because Furious Strike and Critical Blow, the 2 that we haven't talked about yet, and Long Rest, those are just upgraded versions of our zero-cost cards. So nothing too crazy to dig into there. Planning, if you get a double success, this means that you get 3 extra dice for the next horror roll. So if we roll a double success on this and say we were on the green space of our horror track, the green space will give us 3 dice, and then the double success on this would give us another 3. So we'd be able to roll all 6 of our dice here during our next horror roll, just to give us the most odds possible of making sure that that card that we're trying to resolve goes through. The single success is 2 extra dice, and then you lose a time. And the last one is you gain 1 die, increase horror, and lose 2 time. But it can still be very helpful to, again, just make your life a little bit easier in trying to resolve the cards that are really important. I will show these last cards very briefly just because they're important to mention, but again, you can see the Long Rest is just an improved version of our Short Rest, and Critical Blow and Furious Strike are improved versions of our Weak Attack that are going to deal more damage as well as reduce horror, which is really important. But mostly they are great for doing that extra bit of damage. It scales to 1, 2, and 3 damage respectively on each card. Okay, so we've gone through those now. So during your action phase, what I should actually mention is you can play as many cards as you have access to until you run out of time, because a lot of these cards will make you lose time as you play them. So if you ever get down to this red X down here, so say you're at 0 time and then you get a card that forces you down to that X, that immediately ends your action phase. If you're at the 0, you can still do things that aren't going to cost you time or have a chance to not cost you time. But if you are forced into that red X, your action phase is over. So you have the option to play a card, or you can alternatively just discard a card and increase your time by 1. This is usually more helpful when you've got these zero-cost cards that maybe aren't going to be helping you right away. For example, turn 1 and 2, like Walk and Focus, can be really helpful to get moving around the board and reduce the horror levels. But right away, you're probably not really going to be needing your Weak Attack and Short Rest. So you could optionally just sell these off and gain a time for each if you wanted to. You can sell cards all the way up until the end of your action phase. If you're forced to end your action phase, then if you didn't sell any cards, you're not able to at that point. It's already too late. Once your action phase is over, you cannot sell any cards to get more time. Again, that's important to allow you to either keep playing or to be able to buy more cards that will help you out in the long run. So to actually make clear what the gameplay loop is going to look like here, what's important a lot of the times is understanding what the killers are likely to do next and trying to plan around it. And you can see all of these victims on the board here quite spaced out, and there's also these green spots along the board here. Those green spots represent exits for the victims, not yourself, but by rescuing victims, you can actually empower yourself to take on these killers a bit more effectively. And the way you're going to be doing that is by moving around the board. Victims will follow you in most instances, but only ever 2 at a time. So say, for example, I get all the way across here into this room with these 2 victims here, and then I drag them out with these guys and try to move on. I'm only going to be able to take these 2 victims with me. I cannot now add on these 2. But whenever you carry victims to one of these green spaces and you are in that space with them, you get to take them off of the board and actually take them to your final girl, where you'll see these slots here. And as you fill them up, you'll be able to get these bonuses. So maybe I'll put this one here, and that'll allow me to take the guard from the action tableau into my hand. Or I can put it here and reduce horror by 1. All of these spots are one-time uses, but once all 6 of these for Ginny, there's different amounts for different characters. Once all of these slots fill up, then I get to take these victims off and put them back into the pool and flip her over to her ultimate side. Yes, your final girl gets her own upgrade as well. And her, when I flip her over, I get some bonuses that I can select to have for the rest of the game. These ones relate to my 0-cost cards. And then you'll notice at the bottom left as well that even if you keep saving victims after you're on your ultimate side, you'll still get a bonus out of it. For Ginny, in her case, for each additional victim that you save, you receive an additional time, which is very helpful, especially later on in the game when you're trying to get some of those higher cost cards. So that is the basic premise of the final girl. You want to rescue these victims so that then you can get the bonuses out of them, keep things manageable on your end, as well as trying to get through the muck. So once you're done resolving all of your actions, or you're forced to leave your action phase by any means, then you will go into the planning phase, where based on how much time you have left after your action phase, you can purchase cards. So say I'm at 6 time right now, maybe I just didn't do anything for my first turn, I can go and buy cards. And it is important to mention right now that the maximum hand size in Final Girl on Standard is 10 cards. You cannot go over 10 cards, not even just for like a moment. So you can, if I just kept all 6 of my starting cards, I would only be allowed to purchase 4 cards during this phase. But just to show you how the planning phase works, again, I didn't do anything for my first turn, so I have 6 times still left over, which will allow me to spend. So maybe I really want to get cruising around the board, so I'm going to spend 2 time and grab a sprint here. So I'm going to take that 6 down to a 4. And then maybe I want to go looking through one of those searching locations up there. So we're going to spend another 2 time and grab a search here. Now, if I wanted to, I could just call it here. I don't have to keep buying more cards if I don't want to, but I have 2 time left, so I might as well buy both copies of these close calls right here for 1 time apiece, putting me down to 0, which means I can't buy any more cards for the planning phase. So my planning phase is over. I am at exactly 10 cards, so I don't need to worry about anything there. And then now my time will reset to 6 before going to the killer phase. If I had any cards discarded, say maybe I did discard my weak attack and short rest for 2 time, and then I did all of my spending, I had the 2 time left over, didn't do anything with it. At the same time that I reset my time to 6, I then take these 2 cards and I put them in the spot that they belong in the action tableau, which for the 0-cost cards, you can't see it, it's off camera, but it's right below where the close calls were. So those will go back into the tableau so that next turn I can purchase them while I'm doing my planning phase. So after I'm done resolving both my action phase and my planning phase of playing cards, buying cards, and resetting my action tableau, now it is the killer's turn to do something. So the killer's main action here, which is the first step of the killer phase, is resolving the killer action, is going to be on that finale card on just this normal art side. You're going to see next to that K. For this one, it just shows that all killers are going to target the final girl and a victim. Let me actually pull this up here. So this symbol shows final girl or victim, and then a knife to attack. Normally, there would be cases where the killer has the boot here, which means that the killer moves. And both its movement and its damage is dictated by the bloodlust track. So at the start of the game, the killers only have 1 knife, or 1 damage, and 1 movement speed. So in this case, if they had a movement, they would be able to move 1 space, and then if there was someone there, they could attack and deal a damage. When it comes to killers attacking, if there's kind of a rule of ambiguity in the rulebook that you can kind of, if there's equal things happening, so say they're right here, there's a group of 3 victims and a group of 2 victims right here, you could argue that since they're both one space away, there's equal reason for these killers to go in either direction. So the rule of ambiguity states that you make the choice that you think works the most story-wise, or however you see fit. You could do the option that works best for you, the option that works best for the killers, or you can just do like the most logical horror type of situation. So if I want to do what's worse for me, maybe I have the killer go up into the group of 3, because now they can just sit here and camp on these guys and take them out. But they could also go up in here and kill these two. So the rule of ambiguity is there for the player to determine how the killer most effectively moves in situations like that where there is some sort of tie. If there's ever a tiebreaker, sometimes like if the final girl's there, that will be a tiebreaker that they'll go there first, start picking off victims. Because killers will always prioritize victims before the final girl if they're in the same space. Now, if we're in this example where they're still in the starting space here, and I am right here, say they're at a point where they have 2 movement speed. If I'm right here and these groups are up here, they will still go into my space and see me first and start attacking me before getting to the victims. So the only time that they prioritize victims is when we're in the same space, or if we're the same distance away. So if I'm down here 1 space away and these guys are up here 1 space away, they'll go towards the victims before coming down to me. So just remember that overall, when you see that symbol that targets both final girl and victims, it will prioritize the victims if they're in the case of a tie. But if the final girl's closer, it'll just go for the final girl. Now, this action actually doesn't have any movement. This one just says that the killers target a victim or a final girl and attack. And that will only happen if they're in their space, because their attack range is always going to be 0. They will only ever attack in their space, which is very handy to know and plan around. So most of the time early on in the game, these killers specifically are going to be moving through tarot cards, but there are a lot of killers that do have movement printed on their finale card up at the top there. So that being said, basically for the first round, these killers would not do anything for their killer action. You would just go straight into resolving a tarot card, where you take the top card of the tarot deck, flip it over, and just resolve what it says here. So there's a title on here and then actual effects. And when there's the arrows, that just means you resolve those effects in order. So this one tells us to place 2 new victims at the porch, increase horror, and then we resolve a new event card. Tarot cards are the primary way that new events are going to happen. So we would take a new event card, flip it over, and resolve whatever happens on that card as well. So once that is done, you have gone through the killer action, you've gone through the terror card and finished resolving that. And then you'll move on to the next step. But one more thing in the killer phase. So their damage only matters for the final girl, as victims only ever have 1 health. So if the killer ever does any damage to a victim whatsoever, the victim dies. And you'll put the victim into a dead pool here. And anytime a victim dies, whether it's by the killer or by an event or a tarot card, anytime that a victim dies, bloodlust will increase. So again, it starts at the bottom here, and as it moves up, their damage and their movement is going to go up. In this case, the first time that bloodlust moves up, this shows here that this will increase to horror. So if I started at 3, now I'm all the way up at 5, and I'm getting a little dangerously close to that red there. If it keeps moving up, then there's another horror, and eventually about halfway up this bloodlust track here is going to be the dark power, where you're going to take the dark power for the intruders. I'm not going to look at this just because I need it for the playthrough part of this, but I'll show you really quick as an example. Then you would reveal the dark power for the killer, which usually is going to give them extra little abilities. Now, as well with these tarot cards here, let me look through the remaining tarot deck to see if I can find an example of it. Most of these are basically event-style tarot cards, but occasionally you will find what's known as minor dark powers, which is similar to the dark power. It'll just beef up the killers a bit more. This one specifically says at the beginning of the killer phase, the killer with the lowest health recovers 2. And the reason these are down here is because when you get a dark power, you put it above the killer board up there, the minor dark power rather, sorry, and you'll put 1 heart on the card for each of those symbols with the black circles around them. You'll put 1 on there, and then whenever you deal damage to the killer, it'll deal damage to this first. So if I dealt 2 damage, I would be able to take 2 health off of there, and then now this card can go away. I don't have to worry about dealing with that anymore. So when you get a minor dark power, it is pretty important to go attack the killer as soon as you can to get rid of this, because some of these cards can be pretty ridiculous. It doesn't typically have an immediate effect when you flip it over in the terror deck, but it will cause persistent problems for the remainder of the game until you deal with it. And then once the Bloodlust track hits the top here, if victims keep dying after that, you'll see an arrow there, which means the disc stays where it's at, but you just repeat the top effect there, which in this case is discard the next terror card. Sometimes there are other effects, but basically if the killer gets to the top of the Bloodlust track and they keep killing, they're just going to speed run through this terror deck in order to get to their finale faster. So if we were down to like 4 cards left in the terror deck and they killed 3 victims, there's 3 terror cards gone. We have 1 left to resolve, which probably happens right after their killer action, and then at the end of the turn they're on their finale, and now we're in danger. So definitely important to manage that. That's why it's really relevant to save victims. Not only do you get bonuses for yourself, but you prevent victims from dying and impacting the Bloodlust track. That covers pretty much most of the killer stuff as far as I'm aware. If you're in a situation where both you and a victim are on the same space as a killer, if they attack, you can't use a reaction card to that because they're going to attack the victim first. Now, if it was a case where it showed 2 knives on whatever action it was, whether it's their killer action or the terror card, that means they attack twice, so they would kill the victim first, and then if you were still there, they would try to attack you, and then at that point you could use the reaction card. But you can't use a reaction card to try to protect a victim. Unfortunately, that is not an option. Okay, so then once the killer phase is done, you've resolved both the killer action as well as the terror card. Then you move into the panic phase, and this again applies when there is a killer in a space with victims after a victim has died. Now, in the case of like multiple killers like this, say this guy's over here and he killed a victim, these guys will still panic because they're in the space with a killer. We'll say that the red killer is up here, they just killed off one of the 3 guys up here. Now, after the killer phase, we go to the panic phase. So for each of these victims, this is where the numbers between the spaces are going to matter. We're going to take 1 die for each victim and roll it here. So we got a 2 and a 3. As long as they're the same type of victims, and this doesn't matter if there's like a special victim on the board, then you probably want to roll 1 at a time to resolve individually here. So this spot down here shows a 1 to 3. Again, I know it's probably pretty hard to see. So both of these victims will actually panic in this direction here, which is very unfortunate because they're just going to stumble into more killers. But say, for example, instead of the 3, this one had rolled a 5. This guy would instead go this way and be like, oh, hey, I'm with more friends now, and I can be a little more safe. But ultimately, they're just fleeing from the killer that's in front of them. They're not necessarily looking forward to what's ahead. The only time that a victim cares about not moving into a space with a killer is if you are carrying victims with you and you try to move through a killer space. Those victims will not follow you into the space with that killer. So keep that in mind when you're trying to rescue as well. If there's a killer blocking one of these safe exits here, your victims will not follow you into that space. You're going to have to pick one of the other exits to take them out through. So it can get a little precarious in those types of situations. Just be ready to deal with them. Victims will panic into killer spaces, but they will not actively move into killer spaces, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. I might be rambling a bit. Alright, so that's the panic phase. Again, afterwards we just go into the upkeep phase. If there are no cards in the terror deck left at this point, then you're going to take this top finale card here and flip it over, and usually this is going to be something dastardly. It's going to give you some pretty crazy stuff for the killer action, and that's the majority of what it does, is it beefs up this initial killer action to turn them into a deadly force, because now they no longer have terror cards to rely on to make them do extra stuff, so now it's all just on their finale card, and they just kind of go a little bit crazy, to say the least. So that's when things really ramp up and you really got to be ready to take on the fight. After that, again, if there's any items in your tableau here, you are allowed to rearrange them because you have 2 hands, as any given person typically does. And you'll see on these item cards that there is a hand symbol on there. There are some, I could probably find them, but they'll show 2 hands if they're a double-handed item. But in like this case here, the knife and the fireplace poker only have 1 hand each, so I could have both of those actively equipped at the same time, and they would both be able to modify my attacks and do things like that. There are other items which don't actually have the hands at all. These just hang out in your backpack and don't really take up space, so you don't need to worry about having them equipped. They're just there to be able to do extra things for you, which is super cool. There are some items that will have charges on them. Let me see if I can find one here. There are some one-time use items that you just discard them, they do a thing, and they're done. But there are, again, some that will have charges on them, which will allow you to use these little discs down here to mark how many times you've used it, and once you've used all of those charges, then you discard the item and you no longer are able to use it. This one's nice because it lets you get a little bit of range and deal some extra conditional damage, which is nice. So, again, if you used up both charges, then, well, now that item's used up and it can't be used again, unfortunately. This is also an example of a double-handed item, so if I had this equipped, I wouldn't be able to have anything else in my hands to modify. So in this situation, I would have to put the fireplace poker and the knife into my backpack. But during the upkeep phase, if I didn't want the shotgun equipped anymore, I could unequip the shotgun, putting it into my backpack, and then taking the fireplace poker and the knife back into my hand. So that's what the rearrange items is there for. If you got a lot of things going on in your backpack and in your hands, you can shift around to fit the situation that you plan on going into. Okay, and that's pretty much the core of the game. It proceeds until either the final girl or the killer dies, in this case killers. And when it gets to a point where either the final girl or a killer has only their final health token left, that is what is called adrenaline mode. So my final girl, say I'm still in the white zone here, so I only get 2 dice per horror roll, but I only have the final health token left, I get to roll an additional die for my adrenaline mode. I'm pumped into overkick, and I'm just ready to go. But now at the same time, if one of the killers was also down to their final health token, that presents 1 additional die. In the case of multiple killers, if you have 2 that are down to their last final health token, you still only get 1 additional die, so keep that in mind. I wouldn't go up to 5 here if I knocked this guy down to 1 health. On the other hand, when that final health token is used up, say, for example, I'm at this stage and I take another damage, I would then check to see if I die. I would take this final health token, and now is when I would reveal it. This shows a blank side, so I would officially be dead. There's exactly 3 tokens in the game that have health on the other side of this that will allow that character to come back and have a second chance. If I had 1 heart on there, I would basically take this token off, and I would put on the white final health token, which means that I've resolved my black final health token, and at this point, if I lose that token, now I die. That's game over for me. And it resolves exactly the same way for killers. If they get down to their last health token and that token gets removed and there's no health on the back, they die. If there is any health tokens represented on the back of that, then they come back to life with that much health using the white final health token as a life, because this works the same way as the black health token, that when then that's the only health remaining for any person, that will give an extra die to horror rolls. So that is the basic rules of Final Girl. Again, each feature film will present its own differences and unique rules, but for the most part, they use the core mechanics of the game and don't stray too far from this. If you have any more questions or anything like that, please ask them down in the comments below. I will be more than happy to answer them. There could be a couple of small details that I have missed. As always, don't forget to read your rulebook nice and thoroughly. There are some very niche things in here that perhaps, again, I could have easily missed. So don't forget to read this as well. Use this as a supplemental video, and hopefully it will help you along your Final Girl journey. Again, that is all I got for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining me today on How Bored, and be sure to stick around for the playthrough and review of this game as well to get my full thoughts on it, as well as see me actually play it out to really help you tell if this is something you are going to be interested in. Anyways, I hope to see you guys all in the next video. If I don't, if you're not a huge fan of this channel, that's totally fine. Not everything has to be for everybody, but I still hope to see you around in the next one. As always, peace out.